Hey guys, welcome to Belgian Hikers. Let's talk everyday carry. I only recently found out how large the everyday carry community is right here on YouTube and also on Instagram. So many people very passionate about this, all looking for the real man's accessories, because for some reason that mostly seems to be a guy's thing, not really the carrying things around part, but the search for the perfect tools. I was also honestly surprised at the number of people who carry knives and multi-tools as part of their everyday carry. A lot of these are very beautifully designed, often costing quite a bit of money. You look at the pictures and often these look like they don't necessarily get a lot of use. So I thought, why not do a video on everyday carry for hikers, finding out whether it's useful to carry a knife or a multi-tool on hikes and what might be some things to look out for. I've got two Gerber products here to illustrate the dilemma between a knife and a multi-tool. The Gerber Truss, this is a pretty complete multi-tool with 17 functions, and the Gerber Principle. Principle is a fixed blade knife, a bit in the middle in terms of weight and sturdiness, thick and heavy enough for light bushcrafting, but still usable for more general tasks and food prep. Pretty versatile and certainly a knife that has many uses, not just on the trail, but also when camping and around the house. The Gerber Truss is nice and sturdy, not overly heavy for a full-size multi-tool, comparable to something like a Leatherman Wave, which is a very popular option. For hiking, you're probably going to want something a bit lighter, but this is still a very useful benchmark for this video because it includes pretty much everything that you could want in a multi-tool. And the great thing with multi-tools is that especially the bigger brands have what feels like an insane number of options. Both Gerber and Leatherman have over 50 different configurations. So whatever combination of tools that you want, chances are you're gonna find something that fits your use case. And the Gerber Truss kind of gives you the whole menu, so to speak. So what are some problems that you could run into on the trail or while camping that a multi-tool could solve? Since multi-tools are basically Swiss Army knives on steroids, you might assume that the knife is the most used tool, but apparently when these come in for repair, very often many of the tools have seen a lot of use while the knife is still pristine. I don't know if that's true for hikers as well though, because even a small knife can be pretty useful for things like cutting rope, light wood processing, and food prep. Bigger multi-tools often have more than one knife, like the additional serrated one on the truss here. And while you don't really need it, it can be nice to have a dedicated knife that you only use for specific applications like food prep. Pliers can be useful for pulling hot things from the fire, untying knots, fastening tie wraps, and repairing things like zippers. I'm told they're also very useful when you're into fishing, and really, if you're crazy and hungry enough, why stop there? Before I was into hiking, I always used to think that these small miniature scissors were the most useless tool ever. Because what on earth would you do with these, right? Well, it turns out on the trail, these are one of the most useful things on here for things like cutting bandages, but also especially for cutting toenails. The more distance you cover, the more you appreciate a well-trimmed toenail. You sometimes get small tweezers as well, and those can really come in handy, especially if they are the kind that can help you remove ticks. Lastly, the little saw on these can be useful. There's a couple of videos on YouTube of people making real short work of a 2x4 with just one of these, but of course the wood that you find in a forest isn't usually the handy 2x4 variety. So it can be useful, but it won't replace a real saw or an axe. So those are what I would consider to be the most useful tools for hiking use, though a lot of that is obviously personal preference. When shopping for a multi-tool, I think it's best to first decide whether you want a dedicated tool for hiking or if you're looking for something that can double as an everyday carry item in daily life. In that second scenario, I think something like the Truss makes a lot of sense, perhaps in a slightly lighter version. If it's just for hiking, camping, I would recommend listing the stuff that you need and then looking for a tool that offers just that. Because like I said, just Gerber and Leatherman alone have a crazy variety of tools.
Shit.
So what does all that mean for knives? If a multi-tool offers so much in terms of convenience and versatility, does that mean that you would be a fool to bring a knife instead? I think the ideal person to bring a knife is definitely not a fool, but someone who knows how to really use a knife. In the hands of someone who knows what they're doing, a good knife can build a shelter, get a fire going in wet conditions, be super useful for hunting and fishing, and do all kinds of useful stuff. Now, some people might think that bringing a knife has to do with safety, and it does, just not in the way that you might think. You're not gonna stab a wild boar with one of these, you're not gonna win a knife fight with a cougar. But when people get in trouble in the wild, when people die, which luckily doesn't happen all that often, they usually die not because they're attacked, they die either as a result of a fall or an avalanche or something like that, or they die from hypothermia. And when it comes to staying warm, building a fire, making a shelter, a knife can of course be a lifesaver if you have the skills. And bringing a knife doesn't mean that you have to bring the biggest possible knife, and you'll find that the experience of an outdoorsman doesn't always correlate with the size of his blade. A machete might be useful for impressing people, but it's only really useful in a handful of situations.
Got a knife.
That's not a knife. That's a knife.
Depending on whether you want to baton, you're going to want a thicker, longer, fixed blade, full tang knife, or you can get away with something as light and simple and foldable as a classic Opinel number 8. A fixed blade, like the Principle, is going to be sturdier and all-around better for bushcrafting, but it is heavier and it does require a sheath. I'm as much of a sucker for a beautiful knife as these guys on the Everyday Carry blogs, and you can spend a lot of money on high-end knives, but honestly, I do think it's a good idea to invest in bushcraft skills first, perhaps in combination with a more sensibly priced knife like the Principle, before you spring for one of the higher-end knives. Now, I definitely don't consider myself a knife connoisseur, but the feedback I got from my bushcrafting friends is that this is a good all-rounder, nice and sharp with a pretty thick blade, perhaps a bit on the short side for things like batoning, but definitely useful for lighter wood processing, skinning, food prep, etc. What else? It's made from a 420 high carbon steel, so quite tough, pretty sharp out of the box, and decent edge retention. I've read that some people aren't quite happy with the sheath. Personally, I think it's fine. It's got plenty of mounting options and good retention, hard to lose, but easy to take out. By the way, we are doing some knife reviews in the near future, some more heavy duty hunting, bushcrafting, military style knives. So if that's what you're into, feel free to subscribe. Gerber is owned by Fiskars, which is based in Finland, but it's a company with a long heritage of making blades in the United States, though a lot of their products are now made in China. And I have the impression, I'm sure someone will correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, that when you look at the prices, you can kind of see that their Chinese-made stuff is priced pretty aggressively, like the Truss, which retails for about 60 euros here in Europe, while the American-made stuff is quickly becoming more expensive due to the strong US dollar. Some final thoughts on the Truss. It would perhaps not be my first pick for hiking due to the weight and the tool selection, but it is a great all-rounder with a broad feature set at an attractive price. It's good looking. I like how the tools lock into place. The pliers are spring-loaded. Everything is accessible from the outside. If you're looking at something like a Leatherman Wave Plus and you're not entirely sure whether you really are a multi-tool kind of person, then I think this is a great alternative at about a third of the price. In conclusion, if you're a knife person, then you know that you're a knife person. For the rest of us, if you want to be a knife person, invest in the skills first. Otherwise, find yourself a good multi-tool that packs everything that you need and keeps it small and light. Something like a Gerber Dime maybe, or a Leatherman Squirt PS4. Makes a great gift for the holidays too, by the way. Lots of choices, so make sure you don't get stuck in the rabbit hole. Many thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.